Hello, and welcome to Recent Activity, your new favorite entertainment review podcast that attempts to cover every film, every show, all at once. I am your co-host, Andrew Morgan. This is a very special bonus episode for you this week. Netflix has been in heavy rotation on the entertainment news shows lately, and for good reason. From their massive dip in stock value a few months ago to their resurgence in social cachet with Stranger Things dominating the TV conversation, and now the mixed bag of news coming out of their second quarter earnings call, Netflix continues to set the tone for the streaming market for better or for worse. So today, I brought on Kasey Moore of What's on Netflix to help me sort out where Netflix stands right now, what Netflix sees for their future, and of course, what is coming soon to Netflix that will have us begging for more. And does The Gray Man, starring Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans, which starts this Friday on Netflix after a week in theaters, make the cut? Chris and Shane will be back next week to review that film in full, plus Nope from director Jordan Peele. But right now, let's get to my conversation with Kasey Moore. All right, Kasey Moore from What's on Netflix is with us. Glad to see you, sir. I haven't seen you in quite a while because my former podcast, the Netflix Original Movie Podcast, I obviously had you on many times because it fits the bill. But it's not like we don't not cover Netflix anymore over on this channel. We covered the crap out of Stranger Things, for starters. We even covered Senior Year. We don't care. We cover whatever we feel like as long as it's out there and people are hopefully watching it and we enjoy it. How are you, sir? I know it's been a big, tumultuous few months for Netflix, and I don't know how much, you kind of sense that heat or not.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Our stuff is very much just still covering what's new and what's coming up. So that hasn't changed. But yeah, there's a lot of change behind the scenes.
Yeah,
and it depends where you are in the world too, right? In the UK that we've just got Paramount Plus, so that's become a bit more. It's more competitive over here. So I think we're just seeing a global rollout of problems for Netflix, headwinds, and yeah, hopefully they can get out of it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it depends on the day or the place or any of that stuff, because what was it, just yesterday, because we're recording this on Wednesday, the earnings call for the second quarter for Netflix just came out, and as opposed to, say, the last few months, when the market was a little more pessimistic on Netflix and streaming as a whole, to be quite honest. I've never seen more optimism grow from someone losing money, but Netflix definitely got a boost yesterday when they said that they only lost 970,000 subs in second quarter, which was half of what was projected. A lot of people are attributing Stranger Things as to the reason for that, which we can get into kind of strategy stuff to see if that's going to help them going forward. They also mentioned that they expect to sign up to 1 million subs in the next quarter. Their shares went up 6%. They kind of renewed the faith that prolonged subscriber loss is maybe unlikely going forward. But the stock is still down 67% for the year, which is alarming. And hopefully, maybe this means that this will go ticking up slightly, especially when you consider that Netflix reported that in June, of course, again, with a little more Stranger Things stuff going around, they were at 7.7% total TV share, which is an all-time high for them.
Yeah, and that's just in the US. I actually imagine that number is far greater outside the US. But yeah, it's been a strange few years because obviously we saw them absolutely balloon during the pandemic. We're around just before 2019 numbers really in the stock, but obviously Netflix has always traded on infinite growth, and unfortunately it doesn't look like it's there anymore. And the biggest problem for streamers is finding out what their total addressable market is. And I think a lot of people have realized it's probably maybe in the short term a lot smaller than what most people thought it would be. And obviously, although they only lost 1 million subscribers, it's interesting where they gained some and lost some. And in particular, the US and Europe is where they lost the most, but then gained some in Asia. Which I think is going to be a story we see across streamers as in the next year to come.
Yeah, because I heard they reduced prices in India, so it's not a shock that some of that wave did happen in that direction, especially when you consider they increased prices here, and then
Yes.
also and in your area, I believe too, because again, I know at least North America was pretty bad in terms of churn with Netflix, as you mentioned. But I don't know. I don't remember the UK numbers specifically off the top of my head. But as you said, the competition increases. You just mentioned Paramount Plus. I don't know what else maybe you're waiting for along the way, but I know that here there's a million options, of various degrees. But it's a crowded marketplace, and maybe growth is not going to happen as much, which is something that you and I have actually talked about a lot in the past. That they either need to be acquired, they need to acquire something, they need a side hustle like Disney does, where they have tourism, they have theme parks, the whole shebang, where they have assets that can grow them in different directions. And Netflix has just Netflix. So instead of going in those directions, it seems they seem to do small acquisitions, and then now have announced that the ad-supported tier section is going to happen with Microsoft helping them on the ad sales and tech side, looking more like early 2023. What have you heard about that? What have you seen that has made you go, that's not true, or this is false?
I think what surprises me is the whiplash that you get reading some of these announcements. It wasn't too long ago where they said they'd never touch ads with a barge pole, and now all of a sudden, within like 6 months, not only are we getting ad tiers, they're getting it ready to launch, and it almost smells desperation, and it goes back to that problem of how big can Netflix subscriber base be?
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like they're following suit on that front. On the ads tier, because HBO Max has it, all the big ones now have it, and
Disney just announced it.
So Disney Plus is soon to have it. So it feels like they're following suit on that front, and I think the house sharing stuff is sort of like their second prong to get some growth back into it. It'll be interesting to see whether they can get that to work. I think it's going to be very, very hard in practice, and doing it in a way that doesn't, frankly, just tick people off.
Yeah.
Particularly because the tech has to be so good to identify what exactly a household is. If you're around a buddy's house watching it on your phone, does that count? So doing it in a way that doesn't annoy people, but they have to do it. And as you say, they don't have as many arms as much as these other people do. But on the flip side of that, they don't also have the challenges that some of these legacy media companies have got, where they're managing decline on some of their other stuff, and investing big bucks into their own streamers, and still losing money. I'm pretty sure Disney is still losing money on Disney Plus, despite huge subscriber numbers. So price rises and ad tiers, they're in the same boat, and who knows what we're now headed into for the economy and what that does to people's budgets.
Yeah, and obviously you have the ad sales part of it, and also the password crackdown that has been a thing kind of like battered around for quite some time. So they're hoping to kind of squeeze a lot of people who maybe aren't paying for it directly to at least pay something, and that's where they're hoping to see more ad growth. But that's when you've been doing this strategy for so long, it's bound to piss people off. There is gonna be some churn, but I don't know if they think they can make it up in how many new subs they'll get versus people who will just be like, forget Netflix, they piss me off.
Yeah, I think the ad tier is going to be far more simpler in practice. I think what you see is what you get. Whereas with account sharing, I think there's probably a lot of levels that you could look into it. I mean, there's probably quite a few serial abusers out there, where you've got one account that's feeding 20 people and they're all just using the same profiles.
Right.
One could argue that they're not a very valuable subscriber in the first place. And if you knocked that one person off, how many would then eventually from that 20 that's using it get it? And even if you just assume that most people have got 4 or 5 people using it, then there's a lot of extra subs out there. I think the way that I would do it is trying to reward ownership of an account. I don't know how that looks in practice. I think as we go more into theatrical, you could reward people with price off the cinema tickets. They got the Netflix shop, and a few other things. But as I say, doing it in a way that doesn't tick people off, while also at the end of the day, getting their fair share of money from people that are using Netflix.
For sure.
So yeah, it's a fine-tuned balance and act. I think the ad tier is a lot easier in practice. I think that there's a lot of synergy with Microsoft. It also doesn't let a fox in the hen house if there's a lot of the other people that were competing for it. Comcast, if they had all Netflix's numbers, they could easily then put that into their own practice. And Google, well, they've got their own their own stuff that they need to prioritizing. So I think Microsoft's a good fit. I particularly like in the future how that might work with the gaming stuff, because I think gaming over the last year or so, or we're coming up on a year soon, I don't think it's made the impact that they wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure if I asked you to name a handful of games, you probably would struggle.
I could not.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that strategy is still. I don't think that was ever a good strategy, getting into mobile gaming as big as they have. But it's clearly where they want to be heading. So,
yeah. How do you feel this characterization of Netflix is in the marketplace? Because to me, a lot of this is more about their stock evaluation and some of their future stuff. But as far as streaming goes, they are still very much the head of everything and really setting the pace for the streaming market. They currently have 220.7 million subs. They're the only streamer who's actually making money from streaming, as opposed to like everybody else who's starting in streaming and then getting propped up by other parts of the business. If you're Apple, you're Disney, you're Amazon, there's things that make a lot more money that you can now kind of make some mistakes along the way here and still keep a balance sheet in the positive. But I feel like, they get ripped apart for more of the things that they don't do, or just the limited growth of streaming overall. Because even when their numbers were good from this earnings call, their streaming competitors all rose more than 1% in Wednesday's pre-market session. And that kind of happened when they went down, too, that it was across the board. I think there's just a loss of faith in streaming as a long-term money market play. Do you see that maybe kind of happening? Or
yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so, yeah, because ultimately the theory is, how many people that can you get to subscribe to these, and how many will each person subscribe to? And I think really what it comes down to at the end of the day for, podcasts like you and consumers like me and you is really just about content.
True.
Are you getting your money's worth? A lot of people in the US, I think, over the last few years, with the amount of removed content, would probably argue that the value proposition has diminished significantly, which I think is why we're seeing in the US at least more short-term license deals on some big shows, just to keep people ticking over, and the big movie ones as well, which I think with Sony and the Universal, I think that's, you could argue, is a damning indictment on the output of Netflix movies. But as I say, it really comes down to content at the end of the day, and obviously Netflix has been on a big shift as to and ultimately it's art, right? So it's going to come down to subjective. I think Disney Plus is going to have its dedicated audience, and what they put out is not going to be for everyone. I think HBO has really nailed the high quality stuff, so is Apple.
Right.
But you could argue that some of the stuff they're putting out is diminishing. Some of the HBO Max originals, you wouldn't find out a place having a Netflix logo slapped on it. So really, it's just a case of subjectiveness of what you believe is value for your money. And you're ultimately going to go with what you think's worth it. So.
Well, it's also kind of just looking across the other streamers and what is successful for them. Netflix is one of the rare places where the binge model is the primary thing that they do. And not everybody does that. I feel like the evolving thing in streaming is deciding when you have a property or you have something that you think is a hit or should be a hit because it's a sequel season, something extra that's coming through. People are slightly altering their models and being strategic in terms of the release dates. I point to Stranger Things first and foremost for Netflix, where maybe they're evolving too, and maybe for the better. Stranger Things, when you look at it, it shouldn't be a shock to people that this was the volume 1 was released towards the end of second quarter, which helped them maybe buoy some of those second quarter numbers that people thought they were going to have. And then volume 2 is right at the beginning of quarter 3. So when they go, oh, look at how many people we added in quarter 3, it's also because of Stranger Things. So they're learning how to kind of maneuver these things to work in not only their numbers, but also it might be more beneficial to keep the conversation going. And that's what I'd be interested to know from you, because you have a site like What's on Netflix where you're constantly trying to feed the monkey in terms of what's coming out or what's important to a Netflix subscriber. And you probably had so many extra articles about Stranger Things because it was so big of a monster. Do you think that because of the volume separation that actually helped them in terms of prolonging a conversation and really engaging more with the consumer?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think we're seeing it evolve a little bit. I don't think we'll ever go to weekly. I've outlined my reasons for that load of times. I think if you go to weekly, I think you suck all the air out of the room for over an eight week period, which doesn't allow anything new to really come on.
Sure.
Come out. If you look at the weeks that Kenobi and Miss Marvel have now come on to Disney Plus, have they released anything else in between them? And in reality, I think I worked out that, between volume 1 of Stranger Things and then volume 2, Netflix added like 60 something Netflix originals.
Right.
And so you could argue that none of them would have had oxygen to breathe had they done that. But yes, I think if you look at the Google Trends for these weekly episodes, you often see a big bump at the start and then a big bump at the end. So by splitting the seasons into 2, which they've now been doing for at least 2 years, we saw it with Lucifer, they split that season
Ozark,
up.
yeah.
Ozark's a good one. Manifest, they'll be doing the same there with the last 20 episodes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I think what we'll see is a continuation of that, and it just really allows them to replicate the boom of the first episode release and then a second. And obviously, in between that, they can then put out all their extra content, like some of the behind the scenes. Like they really kept up a sustained campaign between Stranger Things 1 and 2,
right?
While also, having new stuff come out, new movies, and the Umbrella Academy was a big show that released in between. So I like splitting the seasons up. As you say, it keeps people engaged for 2 quarters in a row. So yeah, I think it's the new way to go for sure.
I think it helps with the podcasting industry, which is basically free marketing for them too. I mean, there's so many podcasts that cater to, either that age level content or just nerdier sci-fi, that genre content stuff that will cover this. But it's so hard. I'm speaking as a person who did this. Like they literally put it out in a holiday weekend both times. And me and my partners here had to watch, 8 hours or 5 hours of content, depending on which volume. And it's like try to make it up in a weekend and then have an analysis out by Monday. So it really kind of, it obviously they have pros where they would give it ahead of time a little bit to kind of let them do it. But
volume 2, they didn't actually.
Oh, yeah.
They kept that one. Yeah, they kept that one behind closed doors. Volume 1 is definitely the case. But also, I think if it works strategically with the story, right, I think volume 1 of Stranger Things left things in such a way that gets you hyped up. It's a cliffhanger. Not every episode is going to have a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So if it works creatively with the story too, I think if you can strike the iron hot, and that's why we got such a weird season there.
Right.
When you got 2 episodes in volume 2, but it really worked well. And hopefully it's the and I should stress it shouldn't apply to every series. I think you're probably talking like every 1 in 10 maybe.
Sure.
And save it for your biggest one. But there's no reason why The Witcher couldn't end, halfway through a season.
Yep.
On a big battle, and then it carries on in a couple months.
Yeah.
Which gives everyone a time to catch up. It doesn't allow people to get out of pace completely with weekly. Like I constantly did that with Kenobi, where I was out of sync for a week, and then I got it all spoiled online.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's just evolving, and it's I think we'll still see reality TV release weekly in some some places, the docu series Untold is coming back next month, and that's having 4 episodes.
Okay.
But yeah, so I like the split seasons personally.
Is that probably going to happen for something like The Crown? I think is still to come this year.
I don't think it's going to happen with this season. I think they've technically given it an extra season anyway, where season 6 wasn't actually planned.
Sure.
So you could argue we're technically getting it anyway. But it'll probably be next year. But yeah, big ones like that I think would work well. And as well, it helps optimize the budget up front, because you can film them all at once and then have some in the bag for a bit later on, rather than let the production shut down, people go and do other projects, and then you're rebooting everything up, which is, costly. So
right. Well, that's more of like obviously TV strategy. The movie strategy is still confounding a lot of people, even myself as a person who covered it for over 3 years, and you and I have gone back and forth with all of this. We survived the, hey, Red Notice is going to be the Super Bowl, to, oh my God, that was a piece of crap, but a lot of people watch it, so is it a success? We already had that kind of a conversation with Netflix and their whole strategy of kind of putting it out for a week beforehand. They did that with Red Notice, Army of the Dead, some of these other ones. Do you think, now that we're seeing The Gray Man come out this week on Friday, are you seeing anything where like there's either a momentum or that the theater strategy is working, or is there anything to point to that makes this situation any different than maybe some of these past, what some people would call mockbusters in the past?
Yeah, no, probably not. I don't think The Grey Man is going to move the needle. I actually think the first movie that could do well theatrically for Netflix and actually upend their model so far, because I actually think Grey Man is just a continuation of what we've seen with other big budget action movies. Yeah. It's just that a cast this size and the directors behind it just demanded a bigger budget. I do think it's the way we're going to go, where it's visible talent up front. But I think Knives Out could be the change, right? I think if you do a proper theatrical run, particularly because people were accustomed to seeing the first one in cinemas too.
Right.
So I still think that the film strategy is what it is. As I say, I think the fact that they went and got Sony movies to complement their own as an output deal, and they haven't got output deals for TV, speaks volumes about what's coming out on the movie front.
Right.
But generally, I don't think we're going to see a huge shift. I think The Grey Man is significant. I do think it is going to beat Red Notice in terms of hours watched.
I think
in which case, it will probably have done its job, because they get to say that it's one of the biggest movies of the year, which I don't know how you compare that against box office, but they're probably not completely wrong with that statement.
Yeah, I mean, their global reach, the amount of subs, I mean, they're definitely going to have a huge number laid upon it. I just wonder at what point, because they keep doing this thing where they greenlit sequels for this movie even before people have seen it. They did that with Red Notice. After the fact, they greenlit 2 more of them. And so it obviously works for them on some level, but
yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Sorry, we also saw that quite early on in Netflix, right? Bright instantly got a sequel.
Yeah.
Death Note instantly got a sequel. But where are they?
Yeah.
So I think just because they give it franchise hope in the beginning, hopefully that gets them a few headlines, which teases people. The only thing that we've had even close to franchises, is some of the rom-com stuff, which have gone on to receive 2 or 3 movies. Extraction is really the only big budget one that's now got a second movie, which is coming out early next year. And Enola Holmes, you could argue, is in that category too.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, and Old Guard is filming right now too, right?
Yes. Yeah, Old Guard. So that's another good example. But yeah, generally a lot of the sequels sort of just die slow death. I suspect Death Note 2 is definitely done.
Yeah.
Especially now they're giving a series to the Duffer Brothers.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, I heard about that. But yeah, I just don't see, like, franchising. They're so much better at doing the TV version of this than they are the film version of this. And I don't know if that's because of how they actually do the strategy model with releasing these. They don't eventize them as much as like a Disney does their movies, or because obviously they have legacy IP. But, the MCU was created from the ground up. I mean, you have Marvel Comics, of course, but there's been a million Marvel movies that didn't work before the MCU was created. And I know every studio is trying to find their version of it, but I just feel like they keep just greenlighting it, hoping that there is a thirst for something, but they don't do a lot to cultivate that thirst. But they do that way better when it comes to something like Stranger Things, which is why I think it's successful.
Yeah, and it's probably an exception to the rule, Stranger Things, as you say. It's hard. And a lot of the time, I think it's actually hard to differentiate between Netflix originals as it is. You know, we're now at the point where the US library is now comprised of nearly 50% of Netflix originals versus licensed content. And it's really hard when you just see an N logo on a tile, what exactly that means, you know. Whereas if you go on other streamers right now, you know, if it has if it's in the Universal section, or, you know, has a 20th Century Fox, you know, that means something. And I think it's a damn shame that Netflix hasn't now built up internal teams and actually give them names and branding. You know, like the Sea Beast should be among should have a logo sting, you know, their premiere, like Pixar, you know, because if I tell you to go see a Pixar movie versus just a name of a movie, it means something. It evokes emotions, and it evokes, gives you at least some level as to what I expect, you know. But if I read out The Pale Blue Eye, could you tell me what that movie is, or where it's coming from? Or, you know, it's a tricky one, and it's something I've always said, and I think they need to do a better job of, you know, giving stuff branding ahead of time in some way, even if it's not actually, you know, explicitly saying, look, this is a $200 million movie, because you wouldn't know that about The Grey Man unless you actually went and looked into it. But if it was labeled under something like Netflix, you know, I always said, like, having a gold tier, silver tier, and bronze tier, at least you know roughly what you're in for and what they're putting the eggs, you know, where they're putting their eggs. So
yeah, and especially we've talked about in the past that, like, they're having these eventized things like Geeked Week, or, you know, and having the Netflix Geeked Twitter thing, and they have very narrow silos in terms of the Twitter stuff or the social media stuff, but then they don't follow that up with kind of revamping the homepage to kind of pitch to something like that, which might be something to look at, especially when you consider Disney. You know, with all the things they acquired, the first thing you see when you open up Disney is right up top is what's new in a sliding fashion. And then right under that is the tiles of their major IP with Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, National Geographic, Simpsons, things of that nature. So if you know what people come for, put it right there. Separate it out and make it to where people, I'm into this, let me go to this.
And this is often where they then get criticized for the algorithm, because, you know, the algorithm is really what feeds people what to see. But I think the global top 10s prove, if anything, that, you know, freshness is what drives the top 10s and probably most of viewing on Netflix. You know, every time that the first of the month rolls around and there's new licensed titles, they instantly get thrown up onto people's page right at the top in the real estate.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of the trouble. Is I think Netflix is losing a lot of its. They often say that it's tip of the iceberg, but I actually think Netflix's viewing is becoming more and more concentrated to the top of that iceberg, as opposed to a deep, rich library which you're able to browse and view stuff. I think, you know, if it's new, then you'd probably check it out. But once it's been out for a few weeks and months, and there's something new, then they lose that. So I think optimizing in terms of that would be a priority for sure.
And then I just want to kind of maybe wrap up this conversation with something that I already kind of just brought up with Tadum, everybody's favorite sound and or eventized space, right? Kasey, that's how we feel about it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But so this is coming out September 24th, 1 p.m. Eastern here in the States, where at least this time, last year, they had a 3-hour event, which basically had no real rhythm to it or separation by region. They just kind of weaved in and out of projects, and it felt a little disorganized or a little obnoxious to people who only care about one thing.
Yeah, and I actually think it's gonna be harder to know that as well because they've lumped in Latin America with the US and EU, so
Yeah.
that'll be interesting to see how it pans out. They've teased over 100 titles in it. I think a lot of it's going to be to do with what's coming out ahead of Christmas.
Right.
But I also think that there's potential for a lot of surprises. There's a lot of stuff that we know is either finished filming and not due out for a while that they could easily develop some teasers, but hopefully it doesn't go on forever. I find Geek Week to be a bit tedious because of how long it's on for.
Yeah, sure.
And really, you could condense it to a single article or an hour and a half. So it'll be interesting to see how effective it is. Again, why they've called it To Doom when they've got a blog that's got the same name, but it's nothing to do with the blog. You can't even watch To Doom as far as I know. It's actually a YouTube thing.
Right.
Like that would have made sense to have that. Or even if you're developing your own live stream technology, which is apparently what Netflix is doing, why you wouldn't debut it with something like this, you know?
Yeah, just call it Netflix Fest. I've said this. It's exactly what it is. It's just a preview show. It's a clip show. So it's not that big a deal. It is basically 1 3-hour thing that I was like, that could have been an email. And for you, it probably was. So, between like, give me a PDF of what's coming up and when it's coming out and who's going to be in it. But is there something in mind for you that looks like it's going to maybe be a centerpiece thing? Like in the past, I know last year there was a lot of Stranger Things stuff. There was a lot of Bridgerton stuff. There was, they showed little snippets of like, hey, Extraction 2 is coming. Enola Holmes 2 is coming. They're still not here. So it's a year later and they still haven't come to some of these. But they really went hard for a lot of stuff that was coming out in the next few months after they did that. What do you see coming up that is probably going to be a big showcase?
So I made a few predictions. I actually think we'll get a first look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I think is going to be a huge hit or a huge miss. It was mentioned to be a franchise potential for Netflix. I actually don't know how because they don't own it, but it's
right.
I think some of the Zack Snyder stuff could turn up there. I think Rebel Moon is doing quite well, and we all know Snyder loves teasing stuff.
He does,
and I also think One Piece could be the other big thing. And I also hope that we get to see a little clip of the Free Body Problem, which has a huge budget. Comes from David Benioff and DB Wise. That one's been filming for ages now.
Right.
So that one I'm throwing a lot of weight behind. I hope it's as good as the early seasons of Game of Thrones.
How gun shy do you think they are after Cowboy Bebop just completely crapped the bed with all these other kind of live action anime conversions?
Well, and not only that, I mean, more recently, it's Resident Evil. It's that one has fell on its face a little bit.
Sure, but the video game conversion one is a whole other conversation. Most of those fail. I don't know why we keep doing them.
Well, actually, Netflix has actually got a fairly decent track record, at least when it's converting it to animated. Like Castlevania is known for being really good. Arcane is probably one of the best video game adaptations in history. So it's not like they don't have the ability. It's just as I've ranted before, and I was somewhat obsessed. I just don't understand how you could get a load of people in a room, and if any of them are Resident Evil fans, they'd go, "What we need here is a young adult high school drama." It just beggars belief. It's particularly when you've got people like Mike Flanagan and Del Toro working for you.
Sure.
Surely either of those could have come up with. If you ask any Resident Evil fan what they're after, it's a good horror. So
right,
but that's not what we got.
Which Flanagan has a project. Do you think we're going to see some of the October stuff, more of the horror bent stuff with that too?
For sure, I think we'll see a hell of a lot of stuff that's coming out towards the tail end of the year. I think it's actually going to be a primer to get a subscription back for those last 3 months of the year, and I think they are going to be fairly big. From what we know is coming out, even on the movie side is pretty stacked.
Yeah.
Even if not everything's going to be a home run. We still don't know we don't know everything on the TV side yet, but there's good stuff coming out.
Yeah, on the movie side, I think like something like School for Good and Evil could work for them. That they'd probably hope that to be a future franchise thing as well. Especially if you got Paul Feig and a bunch of stars at the helm, Charlize Theron, who clearly doesn't mind working for Netflix long term with a bunch of different things. So that could definitely be helpful. But obviously we're probably gonna. Well, so Sandman is next month, so it'll be post Sandman. So I wonder if there'll be some kind of debrief on that, or if there's going to be season 2. When is the next one for The Witcher? Is that?
So that's Blood Origin, which I'm hearing is going to come towards the tail end of December.
Okay.
Obviously, that could be pushed around. But yeah, that I'd say that was one of the big December series. I think The Crown is the big one for November.
Yeah.
And then October will be the sort of horror stuff. But then some of that could come in September. And speaking of Del Toro, we do actually have his new series, which is Cabinet of Curiosities.
Right.
I actually don't think that's got the press it deserves just yet, because I don't think we know enough about it. But that one has the potential to be huge. I mean, it's kind of like horror, but for Black Mirror, or Black Mirror, but fully immersed in horror.
Yeah.
So.
Well, he's kind of double dipping because he's got Pinocchio coming out by the end of the year too. So his
absolutely.
name is going to be plastered everywhere in Netflix in the last quarter there. But yeah, is there anything else that I'm missing? Because I know a lot of the Oscar stuff that I'm looking forward to, like White Noise. But I know you and I were talking off air, 2 of their potential bigger, Oscar-y titles, or at least big-time director titles, are maybe off the board for 2022, with Rustin looking like possibly 2023 now, and then also The Killer from David Fincher looking like that might not make it for the end of the year. That's been kind of on the edge all this time, but you're saying looking more definitely 2023.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to fit it in, and it's not on any documents that I've seen. They've done a bit of tweaking with that recently. I think a few that could surprise would be Spaceman. It's another Adam Sandler movie, but they're not looking like anything. Hustle was pretty decent, and actually probably one of the best movies Netflix has released this year, or if not, ever. I'd probably put that in my top 50 for sure.
It's my favorite Netflix film of the year. I agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, looking really closely is The Grey Man coming out on Friday, and it's I think that one's going to beat all expectations. Not all expectations. I think it's expected to do better than Red Notice, but I think it's going to pull in the numbers. It's actually quite a long film too. I think it comes in just above Red Notice, which is something that helped Stranger Things out. Its massive long runtime really helps it when you're measuring hourly viewers.
Yeah, this one, it's not too long. If I remember correctly, it's only a little over 2 hours. I don't think it's going to hurt too much in that.
It felt longer. It felt longer.
I agree. And stay tuned for next week to my audience, because we'll do a full review on Nope, which I'm going to see on Friday, and Gray Man, which I have already seen. Watching this now, I know the stars are going to pull them in. And I know people like this type of movie, so they will watch it. I just don't know, especially now that you're already announcing sequels and such. I don't see this having any kind of legacy. They might make more. I wonder if they're going to get these stars to be back in the fold again, too. So I don't understand, because especially Gosling took such a time off, and this is what he comes back with. And I was just like, okay, to be the lead, but not even the best part of a possible franchise is bizarre. So yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, they're doubling down on the Russo brothers, because they've got at least half a dozen other projects coming up for Netflix exclusively. So that's
and Ana de Armas.
Yes, yeah, and plenty of that. And I think that's what you could see a lot more of is, stars that have multiple titles throughout the year, and, it keeps you engaged, because if you like this title from them, you're probably going to like another one. And
yeah, it's almost like they should bundle them together and put them in a collection.
Yeah, and I think exactly, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think The Grey Man's going to do the numbers. I actually think there's going to be a big split between what audiences and critics think on that one.
I believe
similar fashion to Red Notice. I didn't realize how big that split was until I re-looked it up recently. With audiences, that one's like a 90%.
What?
If you read the critics for that one, they don't like it at all. So
I didn't like it at all, but I also didn't think that. I think
it's because you probably sit on that, whereas I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, I thought it was serviceable, which is
I thought it was incoherent, and that's why I'm surprised to hear that. Yeah, I mean,
92%. I'm looking now
on the audience score.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And a 6.3 on IMDb, so it's kind of split there. But yeah, it's wild. I don't know what to think about that. You've now shook me to my core that maybe I'm looking at this all wrong. But, again, Netflix, very successful business. One of the biggest, you can arguably the only successful streamer right now because it's the only one actually making money. So, we'll see where they put that money and how they're going to split up assets or keep that consumer moving along. Hopefully, Doom gives us some surprises, something that, we can actually be looking forward to coming up. But I tell you, I look forward to talking to you again, sir, because it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on. Tell the people maybe what you got cooking over at What's on Netflix and maybe something to look forward to, especially coverage of Tudum. I'm sure you're going to be all over it.
Yeah, we'll be all over that one. Right now, we're working on some of our 2023, 2024 lists because we've pretty much got 2022 in the can one way or another at the moment. So they're the big lists that we're working on for what's coming up. But yeah, generally same stuff. We're working on building out and hopefully getting some reviews on the site soon. So it's we'll move into that area.
Hey, sounds great. Always good to see you, sir, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
All right, my thanks to Kasey Moore from What's on Netflix. Go to what's-on-netflix.com or Google What's on Netflix to check out the latest comings and goings for Netflix content. And be sure to come back to our show next week as we cover the Netflix film The Gray Man, as well as our most anticipated movie of the summer, Jordan Peele's Nope. So we will see you next time on Recent Activity.